I'm Laila Tara H. I'm a painter, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about the roots of Mughal miniature painting, a little bit about Persian miniature painting, and a lot about migration. When we walk through a museum, they're not necessarily categories based on any particular time frame, but instead they tend to be categories based on empire, state, and border. What they really miss is this key factor of migration. Migration of people, of painters, storytellers, merchants, of keepers of culture. The story of Humayun is a perfect tale of such artistic migration. It happens to be the tale of how Mughal miniature painting came to be. Born one son of many to his father Babur, his troops and him were on a constant chase to gain control. Eventually Humayun had to step down. Emperor became refugee. With his pregnant wife by his side and 40 soldiers for safety and support, they climbed through valleys and mountains until finally reaching rest in Persia. Here in Persia, in the world of Shah Tahmasp, Humayun was overcome with sights of beauty. He wasn't only seeing Persian architecture, but he was seeing Persian miniature painting at one of its finest moments. With the aid of the Safavid Empire and the support of Shah Tahmasp, Humayun was able to go back to India and reclaim his throne, taking with him a new way of painting and a new studio. But this really reached its peak under the reign of his son Akbar. Akbar began a huge expansion of the studio inherited by his father. The studio was run by the two painters brought back from the Persian Empire, Mir Said Ali and Abd al-Samad. What they did was teach lots and lots of craftsmen and painters. They were painters who were coming from all around the kingdoms of northern India. One of my favorite manuscripts, the Akbarnama, and it took 7 years to complete. It was completed by over 49 different artists, and all from the royal studio set up by Humayun. Beyond this, it's a demonstration of Persian influence, and very importantly, a demonstration of Mughal artistic growth. Most of them carry a vertical perspective that we really only associate with Persian miniature painting. And on top of that, they're ornate. They have loads of trees and mountains that would be almost impossible to differentiate from their Persian sisters. And to add on to this, the colors of the backgrounds and the colors of these mountains are really distinctly Persian. It depicts the story of Akbar in an entirely natural setting. So in Persian manuscripts, you tend to see figures that are near identical, tend to lack personal characteristics, and tend to sit very still. And this is something that hugely changes in Akbar's Akbarnama. There's a rhythm that begins to form rather than a symmetry that we see in Persian miniature painting. The clothing is naturally Indian, but beyond that, the residents of scenes start to move. They start to gain life in their journey through this Akbarnama, and that's one of the most incredible things. Beyond things like their skin color, we see different facial features. We see that their eyes are different, the shapes of their beards, their hair, and even the tilt of their faces. Paintings begin to move from rigid to round. They slowly begin to gain a three-dimensionality that didn't exist in their predecessor. One of my favorite illustrations from the manuscript is that of Rai Surjanhada making submission to Akbar. Painted by Mukund and Shankar in the most vibrant of colors, the image depicts the ruler of Ranthambore in northwest India submitting to the Emperor Akbar. Akbar himself is wearing the softest lilac, and he's sitting on a super bright minium throne. The throne rests on this ornate lapis carpet, and the event itself is taking place in this deep red tent lined in the most phenomenal little malachite frilly border. It's these huge amounts of colors that one can really draw Mughal miniature painting from. And the other phenomenal thing is how the characters are standing beside one another. Inside, there's formality. The characters stand relatively still, while on the outside there's a bustle, there's a real sense of happening, and each character is super distinct, but they all rely on one another. So they're all either looking at each other, passing by one another, or literally in transition. What's notable here is how Akbar presents himself. We can see in the painting that he's actively sparing the Raja from the indignity of having to bow. Something's been happening almost simultaneously in both the Mughal and the Persian empires, and that's that flowers are being painted. but they're developing in very similar styles. Both the Safavids and the Mughals are depicting flora in increasingly more detailed and bright manners. They're expanding from the ornamental shell gold that is used to frame the interior imagery into vivid showstoppers. They might still be in the border, but they're also beginning to take the forefront and to sit as central imagery. One of my favorite stories is that of Muhammad Zaman, a royal painter under Shah Abbas II. He was best known for his impeccable skills and also his imagination. One of his lifelong dreams was to go and study in Rome. So, with the aid of the royals, he was sent to study painting. And while he was there, he converted to Christianity. He donned a new name when he came back, Paolo. But sadly, he was exiled because of his change in faith. And where was he exiled to? The Mughal Empire, taking with him all of the skills that he had picked up in the Persian Empire, but also the style that he had picked up during his studies in Rome. Painter of many things, in many styles, and from many places. I'm often asked why, with my Iranian heritage, the miniatures that I paint are more reminiscent of the Mughals than the Persians. More often, I'm stumped at a response, because I call on my own history. Born in London to already moving Iranian parents, raised in India, in Africa, across the global south and now the global north. The distinctions between the rooms of a museum, a gallery, or an art history book simply don't apply here. And truth be told, now we're all a little nomadic anyway, even if it is just through our screens.